understand the concept of love.
Hello everyone, Carl4 here with another video. Today we're going to talk about Igniz, kicking off the 5th anniversary celebrations for Global. Probably the worst kept secret in the game, since last year we copy-pasted the Chinese anniversary event, not taking into account things like power systems we didn't have or characters we didn't have and such. And this year Taiwan delayed Igniz to match it with their own anniversary, and basically we knew we were going to copy paste China/Taiwan and get Igniz and Hein for our own anniversary. So this is step one. Here's Igniz. So let's get into it. He's a gank. He has Space Soul, gains additional 85 rage at the beginning of the round and restores some HP. Earth Shaking badge, Mana Tome, pretty standard stuff. His fates are pretty expensive, full API 15s, people like Benny 13, which many people won't have, a lot of different, like Angel, a lot of people here that most likely won't have. Don't worry too much about fates. A completed fate on a 1.7, 1.8 million character is something like 10 to 15k power, so it's really nothing. This 25% attack is base stat, so it doesn't really matter, okay? Not having fates is not going to make or break your character. When it comes to gates, they're pretty easy if you're in older servers. If you're in some of the newer servers, like in the high 90s or something, you might have some issues getting these, so you might want to look into using a skip stone, because getting them all to lake might be an issue for you, but otherwise pretty easy. And let's get into his skills. Let's start with his passive. So when he's deployed, he gains 45% attack, defense, ult damage, small skill resist, and ult resist. And whenever he enters the field, or whenever the enemy turn begins, he will receive a buff. If he's frontline, he will gain 15% res. He will have damage limitation of 40 to 60%. The more fighters there are, the lower this number is. So if you're fighting against 6 people, it'll be 40%. If he's 2v1 or something, it'll be 60%, right? The more enemies alive, the lower the value, what I was just saying. And he gains 1 stack of septic resistance, which is pretty useful because you're in all the septic fighters. If he's backline, if there's no enemies behind him, he gains 20% attack and 20% rage speed and 30% attack. So basically, you can use Igniz in either position. He's pretty much the most versatile character in the game in terms of being an all-rounder. Like, he's an amazing frontliner, and if you put him backline, he's going to be very good as well. The reason why, if you look at videos, you're going to see a lot more of him frontline is because that buff he gets, the damage limitation, the septic resistance, is a lot better, in my opinion, than attack and rage, right? When you think about people like, when you think about the characters in the game, like Chris, like Diamond, like Yamazaki, like, there's a lot of septic coming, so having those stacks of septic resistance really helps. Not only that, but the damage limitation is huge. Because if he's backline, you can do 100% of his HP if you've got a strong enough character, right? If you get a properly trained Angel to go after him, she will take all of his HP, no issue. But if he's frontline, they can't do that. And because he has a lot of healing and he's got a lot of undyings and shit like that, it makes him really strong frontline. Plus, around this time, we're going to get a bevy of like backline characters, like brutal ones. You're going to get Mai. You're gonna get Diamond. We've already got Angel. You've got Goenitz. You've got Chris. You're gonna get all these crazy backliners in short order. And in the future, the frontliners that come are gonna replace the ones we're using right now. Like, natural progression is to get like Rob and replace, I don't know, Yashiro or Liz, and get Dualon to replace the other one. Personally, Yamazaki, for example, I would run backline, so I don't really consider him a contender for the frontline. But yeah, personally, I think he's better frontline, because I think the buffs he gets from being frontline are a lot stronger than the buffs he gets for being back. But he can do either job fantastically well. When he's deployed, when he enters the battle, gain 3 stacks of divine power. Each stack lets him resist 1 lethal damage, and you gain 1 additional stack for every enemy death, and he can gain up to a maximum of 9 stacks, and he can hold a maximum of 7 stacks at the same time. So basically, each of these stacks is 1 Undying, and he can have up to 7 Undyings at the same time. He starts with 3, and he can gain up to 9. So in a fight, he can have a maximum of 12 Undyings if everything works well, right? That is, if he's basically the last character standing and every other enemy character and striker dies. So that's an incredible amount of survivability, as you can imagine. There's nothing that really comes close in terms of Undyings to that. So when you consume a stack of divine power, which is his Undying, he dispels his own negative states, gains permanently 30% control free. So by the time you use your fourth Undying, basically, it's going to be control free. He's going to be control immune. It's going to be over 100. So restores 500 rage and consumes 10% of the current HP of all fighters on the battlefield, yours and the opponent's included, except Igniz himself. This damage doesn't restore rage and is unaffected by damage increases or decreases. He takes that damage and he restores 150% of the HP he's consumed, which is at least 50% of his own max HP, and then restores 10% max HP to your own allies, except Igniz himself, because he's already healed. Igniz is immune to suppression, which is his own personal effect. If you played back in the day, it's basically the effect that where he makes you small. Whenever your turn begins, restore 10% HP to your ally with the lowest current HP, restore 100 rage to an allied fighter without full rage, and allow your allied fighters to block or resist attacks even if hit by a critical attack. So if you've got Awakened Psyche or Demon Psyche, whatever you'd like to call him, this is the effect he gives when he ults. Igniz has this automatically. He doesn't need to ult to do this. He doesn't need weapon like Demon Psyche does, so it's pretty nice. When he consumes a stack of divine power, enter the deity state. Cannot be selected as an attack target until your next round. Can only take effect once per battle. Igniz is immune to negative status on the first turn after being deployed, and must release small skill on the first turn. So basically, the first time they would have killed him, and he uses one of these divine power stacks, for the next round, similar to what Shermie does, he cannot be selected. So they can't, basically, the first time they take one of your Undyings, they can't take 4 or 5 on the same turn. Later on they could, but on the first time they do it, he's going to become unselectable for 1 turn. When you're on the battlefield, gain the following buffs depending on the type and amount of allied fighters. Each of the buffs can be stacked for an additional time up to 3 times. So this is the same kind of mechanic that Mizuchi had, that was introduced with Mizuchi and then Psyche. If you have for each DPS, you get 12% block rate and 5% res rate. For each tank, you get 12% crit rate and 5% damage rate. And for each gank, you gain 10% rage gain speed and 30% small skill chance, plus 100 extra rage when deployed. So it's pretty much the same kind of idea for Mizuchi and Demon Psyche had. They basically gain buffs depending on your team composition. And finally, his Captain's Aura. Increase your own damage and res, and other characters in the field receive 40% of the amount he increases, and if there are at least 3 fighters in the field at the time of deployment, increase all your allied fighters' small skills resist and ult resist by 40%, and 50% res rate, crit rate, and crit power for 3 turns. This part here, the increase your own damage and res, is his level up part, right? Is what you can level up. So he's going to give 40% of whatever this skill is to the rest of your team. Again, similar to what Psyche did. Pretty strong, pretty nice buff. Really good passive. Makes him really hard to kill. Has a bunch of team support stuff. Has the Captain's Aura, obviously, which is the main thing for any meta leader. So yeah, really good passive. Skill, as you can see, he gets quite a lot from getting Thunder, which incredibly is unlocked on release. I think that's the first time we've ever had a character get Thunder on release. I think we've had Lake a few times before in the early days of Gates when a character was released, but never Thunder. So attack a single enemy when being attacked. There's a 50% chance to reduce that direct damage received by 60%. So this is resist, just like Demon Psyche has. Absorb 25% of the target's max HP and 50% of the target's res and block rate, ignoring control free. That's a huge debuff for the frontliners. Absorbs 250 rage. For 1 round, every time he is hit, increases his own small skill damage by 5%. It can be stacked and it will disappear the next time he uses small skill. So if you've seen him do crazy amounts of damage with his skill, this is why. Because if he gets hit a lot, then he's going to do a lot of damage with it. And he has a 50% chance to restore 10% of your max HP. Continue to store all the rage gained by yourself, able to store up to 750 points, and release it the next time you act. If there's a rage overflow, you will be immune to rage reducing effects until you release your ult. Lasts 1 round, and each point of overflowing rage restores 0.06% max HP to your allies, up to a maximum of 30% max HP. So basically, he's got a similar thing to Terry, like where he can overflow rage and keep it for himself. And what happens is that as he stores it up, when he I think it's when he ults, he releases this and he will heal your team based on how much overflow rage he has, up to a maximum of 30% max HP recovery. It's quite a lot, and he can do this, like he can heal quite a bit quite often because he gains a lot of rage, so it's really strong. This line here, they absorb 25% of the target's max HP and target's res rate and block rate. This is massive. This is a massive debuff for any enemy tank, and a massive buff to his stats because it's an absorb, right? And it ignores control free. So this is like a really powerful skill. Like his normal skill is good, and then you get Thunder and it goes absolutely fucking bonkers. It's so good. And finally, let's talk about his Smax. So attack a random single target with priority to a target who can be suppressed but is not currently suppressed. So as I said, suppression is the effect where he makes somebody small, right? Increases his own damage and res by 35%, and your damage intensity, which we don't know what this is. I have a feeling that this just might be that they changed the wording for actual damage or something like that, or for crit power or something, because when we're doing the translation, even our native Chinese speaker, Xiaohai, who speaks Chinese, even he couldn't figure out what the hell this was in global. So unless they've added a new stat, which I don't think they have, but maybe they did, we're not 100% sure of what that is. He absorbs 40% of the target's ult resist, ignoring control free, absorbs 25% of the target's max HP, dispels the negative states of an allied fighter, priority to a controlled ally, suppresses the target for 3 rounds, as I said, shrinks the target size, reduces their damage and res by 30%, ignoring control free, cannot be dispelled, cannot apply to target in an enlarged state, so it won't work against someone like Jeez. Absorbs all the dark flame effects on all of your team, and each flame absorbed increases your own damage by 5% for 2 rounds, can stack with others of the same type. So this is where they went to become absolute cunts, and they decided they didn't want you running both Igniz and Demon Psyche, because Demon Psyche is still pretty decent, like, you know, with his infinite revives and shit. So they decided, what can we do to get these people to get rid of Demon Psyche? Oh, I know. We'll take all his dark flames, and basically for every dark flame we're going to make Igniz do more damage. Isn't that fantastic? So if you're running Psyche in the era where Igniz gets his S-Max, you're basically going to be buffing Igniz, which is a little bit stupid, but they didn't want you running both, basically. Anyway, when our side releases an ult this round, consume all your rage to release a follow-up ult, and you add additional damage to the main target equal to 50% of the damage caused by the ult that triggers this chase. So basically, if you've got Yashiro before him and Yashiro were to do, I don't know, 5 million damage or whatever, he would add 2.5 million of that damage to his actual ult, if that's what triggered it. This can be activated once per 10. When this skill is released, gain 1 stack of creation power, 2 if it's chase, up to a maximum of 7 stacks. Could be held at the same time. Before releasing this skill, if the creation power reaches 7 stacks, you will enter the divine state for 1 round. Consume all the creation power stacks you have. You are unable to gain more stacks during this period, and you will obtain the power of creation. Your ult does 35% additional damage to all enemies in a suppressed state. This damage doesn't restore rage, and during this time your extra chase ult can be triggered once more, so he can chase twice per round basically. After entering the divine state, increase the max number of divine stacks by 1, and after entering the divine state for the first time, permanently switch to the Cruel Gods project. In addition to the original effects of the ult, gain the divine nature effect for 1 round, expand your body size, become immune to stun and paralysis, and increase your own damage by 15%. So this ult is really strong. He's basically going to be suppressing 2 targets per round, pretty much. He even differentiates targets that cannot be suppressed, so he won't be targeting Igniz himself with the ult. And when he basically this line here, where is it? This part here. He deals 35% to all enemies in a suppressed state. So if there's 3 enemies in the field that have suppression, he's going to be doing 35% of the ult damage to them. This is pretty strong. I think his Smax is pretty nuts. It's not the craziest one that is to come, but if it didn't have the extra chase, it would maybe wouldn't have been as crazy. But the fact that he adds an extra chase, so he's going to get to ult like 3 times per round without Storm, is pretty insane. Because what it's going to do is you're going to be absorbing stats from everyone. You're going to be suppressing them so they do less damage apart from the stuff that you've already stolen from them. He's going to be keeping himself healed up. He's going to be clearing a lot of control. It's like, it's really strong. The main issue I feel for Igniz, and you might have noticed this if you've seen his kit, is that he doesn't have a lot of self-clear in terms of like CC, right? So he's not as immune as Demon Psyche was. Demon Psyche had a lot more immunities to CC in his kit, whereas he himself, he only gets immunity to stun and paralysis, or the control free once he's built up enough, once he's been basically killed 4 times. So it can be a little bit tough early on, depending on how you have him built on him. CC can be. As the match goes on, obviously CC becomes less of an issue, but he's also lost like a certain amount of lives basically. Truly strong character. He basically does everything. He can be run frontline or backline. He is just overall like an absolute beast of an all-rounder. And on top of that, he's your meta captain. So it seems like in recent times they've been making sure that the meta captain is the one unit you have to get every year. And you can tell by the results of the draws in China and such. So this guy is the one broken person in my tier list, and I feel like and the reason for that is not any one part of his kit, it's because of everything he does and the fact that he's the meta leader. There is nobody else that is going to have the impact on your team that this man has. Not Yamazaki, not Rob, nobody. Because if you don't have Igniz, it doesn't matter if you have Rob. If you're still running Psyche, you're going to be getting fucked. Because his enemy Psyche, if he's well trained, is just going to be a bastion. You're not going to be able to move him from that fucking front line, right? Because he's going to have like 9 lives, and the buffs he gives to his teams, and the amount of CC he clears, and the amount of debuffs he gives to the enemy team by reducing the damage and their attack, and the fact that he's going to get buffed by people running Psyche, and he's bloody toxic is what he is, which I guess fits to a T to him being a god, right? So yeah, if you're in doubt of characters to get in the near future and such, the one character you shouldn't have any doubts about is Igniz. Right, if you get him, he can be the cornerstone of your team all the way until next anniversary at the very least. He's going to do a great job, even if he doesn't do a lot of damage because you don't have the right amount of runes or whatever. The amount of damage he's going to prevent by suppressing people and by stealing stats and by buffing your team's defense is just such a huge overall contribution that he's someone you really want on your team. So yeah, easy broken char this one. You really want this man in your team. In terms of what runes you want to run on him, just like he's versatile for frontline or backline, he's versatile in terms of runes as well. If he's frontline, personally, I like him with Thorns or Earth. It depends on what you're aiming for, right? So Thorns is more healing, which he already has quite a bit of healing. All that stacks together and it gets augmented, plus the Reflect. He doesn't have any natural Reflect, but he's going to be your longest lasting front liner most likely for quite a while. So he's going to be doing Reflect all the bloody time. Earth is just going more on the make him an unmovable wall, reduce enemy attack when he gets attacked. You're not going to be using the six effect, the 6 rune effect until very late in the match, so that's not as much of a consideration as it might have been with other people, right? If you have someone that dies early, like a lot of people's Yashiro or stuff like that, then it makes more sense because he's gone by round 4 or 5 and that debuff can help quite a bit in those stages. By the time you've killed Igniz, unless you have overwhelming advantage over your enemy, you're probably going to have Igniz and somebody else left in the back line, and that's about it. In terms of chips, I like both Python and I really like Scorpion on him. He's going to be attacking everyone with his chase ults, so it's very easy for him to trigger the marks on Scorpion. Obviously Python is really easy because it's just 30% of damage and res, whatever. It's just flat bonuses are always easy to do, so either of those are great for him. I don't think he needs slugs. As you know, if you're watching my videos, I'm not a big fan of slugs. I think they're quite limited. I think if you're going to run slugs on Igniz, you might as well just run Scorpion and use the HP drain on those and still have bonus damage, so he can do both things. In terms of Fightsouls, so it depends on where you're going to be running him. Obviously, if you're frontline or backlining him, it's going to change. Frontline, if you're seeing you're getting hit really hard by CC, Guardian is obviously a perfect choice for him because fuck CC. Unyielding works well in the front line because it has CC clear at low HP, it has bonus damage, it has bonus res, so it affects both part of his kits. It's obviously really good. Wolf is really good in just making him an absolute powerhouse because he will be tough as a fucking rock, right, by absorbing even more stats than what he already absorbs himself, stealing those stats and then using them to hit back like a fucking truck when he does his ults and his chases. So I think those are my 3 preferred Fightsouls for him: Unyielding, Guardian, Wolf. If you have him backline, I'm honestly not sure that I would run Storm on him. I don't think he needs it because he's already going to be ulting 2 or 3 times per round. So if you're running him backline, I'd probably run him with Unyielding, maybe War God, but I'm not a big fan of War God on like people with low crit power. I would only run it on people like I'm not a big fan of it on ganks. I'd run it on Shermie because Shermie requires crit on her kit, but that's about it. So probably if I was running backline, I'd probably run him on Unyielding. If I'm running frontline, I'd run him on Wolf, Guardian, or Unyielding. Unyielding works on whether you're frontline or backline, honestly. Yeah. So other than that, things to consider for him are how to get him, right? So his limited draws come in. We don't know if there's going to be a carnival for this anniversary. There should be, but we didn't have one for Christmas, so you can't trust Finger Fun because they're really bad at making fucking decisions and keeping people happy. Ideally there is, so my recommendation whenever we get bosses during these big events is always the same thing: wait till the last day of the draw, because if there is a carnival, it could line up with his limited draw, right, with the last day, or it might line up with his weapon, so it's something to keep an eye on. I don't think you're going to be able to get him through position, through ranking in the event, unless you're willing to spend a lot of diamonds, because I think his draw is going to be pretty nuts. I think there's going to be a lot of people bombing his draw with alt counts and stuff like that, so I think you're better served either just getting him through pulling him until he drops, or waiting until redraw when things have calmed down a little bit and everybody's blown the load during the anniversary, right? So you suffer a little bit longer, but you have a little bit less issues later. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about him. I think he's probably the best all-round character in the game, other than maybe Rob, but that's because Rob just does everything as a tank. I think he doesn't, what he contributes to like DPS and stuff like that is amazing, but I think just like overall what Igniz brings to the team is insane. Just keep in mind, if you're having a lot of issues with CC and such, to try and prevent that, right? If you have Guardian or Unyielding, or if you're running Goenitz, that will probably alleviate it since you can cleanse through people. Yeah, hopefully this will be helpful to some of you, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Time to go in and do the quick recap now. Okay, so quick recap. Igniz, new meta leader, API 15 gank, Earthshaking badge, mana tome, really expensive fates, cheap gates. His passive, when he's deployed, he increases attack, defense, hold damage, small skill resist, alt resist by 45%. Whenever he enters the field or whenever the enemy turn begins, he gets a buff. If he's in the front line, he gets 15% res and gets damage limitation of 40-60% based on the amount of enemies on the field. He gains 1 stack of septic resistance. If he is in the back line, he gains a rage regaining speed of 20% and attack by 30%. When he enters the battle, he gains 3 stacks of divine power. Each one of these is 1 undying basically, and you can gain 1 more stack of divine power, 1 more undying for every enemy death, up to a maximum of 9 stacks. He can only hold 7 at the same time, so you can never go over that. He can basically survive up to 12 times in a battle if every enemy dies before him. When he consumes one of those stacks, like basically when he triggers an undying, he dispels all his debuffs, gains 30% control free permanently, which can be stacked, so basically by the time you've used 4 of those, he's going to be immune to control. He restores 500 rage, and he steals 10% of the current HP of all the fighters in the battlefield, both allies and enemies, and he heals himself with 150% of that amount, at least 50% of his max HP, and then restores 10% of that max HP to your allied fighters, other than Igniz. He's immune to suppression effect, which is his own special effect. Whenever his turn begins, restore 10% to your ally with the lowest HP, restores 100 rage to an allied fighter without full rage, and allows your allied fighters to block or resist attacks even if they get hit by a critical, so basically the same effect that Demon Psyche does when he ults. When he consumes a stack of divine power, so when he activates Undying, he enters a deity state once per match, cannot be selected as an attack target until the next round, so he's untargetable until, basically, if they were to hit him round 1 and activate his Undying, they can't target him anymore until the next round. Igniz is immune to negative status on the first turn after being deployed and must release full skill on the first turn. When he's on the battlefield, he gets buffs based on if you have DPS, tanks or ganks, up to 3 times. So if you have 3 DPS, you'll get 36 and 15%, etc. Captain Zora, he increases his own damage and res by the amount you see down here, and other characters in the field receive 40% of that amount. And if you have at least 3 other fighters in the field at time deployment, increase all your allied fighters' small skill resist and alt resist, and res rate, and crit power for 3 turns. His skill attacks a single enemy. When he is attacked after skilling, there's a 50% chance to reduce that direct damage by up to 60%. Sorry, by 60%. He absorbs 25% of the target's max HP and 50% of its block and res rate, ignoring control free. Absorbs 250 of the target's rage, and for 1 round, each time you are hit, he increases his own skill damage by 5%. This can be stacked and he will basically discharge it the next time he uses a small skill. And he has a 50% chance to heal 10% of his max HP. He keeps on storing raids, he overflows it basically like Terry does, like the Hungry Wolf Terry, up to 750 points, and he releases it the next time he acts, so on the next turn. If there is a rage overflow, you will be immune to rage reducing effects until your next ult, and each point of overflowing rage restores 0.06% max HP to your allies, up to a maximum of 30% HP. It's a lot of healing. His S-Max attacks a random single target, priority to a target who can be suppressed but is not currently, so he won't be targeting, for example, Igniz unless everybody else is suppressed. He increases his own damage and res by 35%. Damage intensity, this is a stat, we don't know what it is, we don't know if it's just a change in terms they use to describe stuff, so that's why it says TBD here, keep that in mind, and we will see when they add him tomorrow. Actually, I don't know, it's normal, but absorb 40% of the target's ult resist, ignoring control free, absorb 25% of the target's max HP, dispels the negative states of an allied fighter, priority to people who are controlled, suppresses a target for 3 rounds, basically makes them small, reduces the damage and res, ignores control free, can't be dispelled, cannot apply to targets in an enlarged state, such as, for example, Overlord Jace. He absorbs all the dark flame effects of all your team, and each flame absorbed increases your own damage by 5% for 2 rounds, and this can stack with other buffs of the same type. So basically this line right here, what it means is fuck Psyche, right? It's just there to make you get rid of Psyche when Igniz gets S-Max. Pardon me. When our side releases an ult this round, consume all your raids to release a follow-up ult, and add additional damage to the main target equal to 50% of the damage caused by the ult that triggers a chase. So if you had, for example, say Yashiro going before him, and he did a 5 million ult, you would add 2.5 million to the main target, right? This can be activated once per turn. When this skill is released, gain 1 stack of creation power, 2 if it's a chase ult, up to a maximum of 7 stacks can be held at the same time. Before releasing this skill, if you have 7 stacks, you will enter into the divine state. You consume all your stacks, you can't gain any more stacks during this period, and you obtain the power of creation. Your ult does 35% additional damage to any enemies that are in a suppressed state. This damage does not restore rage, and during this time your extra chase ult can be triggered once more, so he can do it twice per turn instead of once. After entering the divine state, increase the max number of divine stacks by 1, so that's another undying. And after entering the divine state for the first time, permanently switch to Cruel God's Project. In addition to all the original effects, he gains divine nature, which for 1 round expands his body size, becomes immune to stun and paralysis, and increases his own damage by 15%. Best runes for him, he is very versatile, so it depends on what you want to do. Backline, he can pretty much use any offensive runes, just use the best ones you have on him. Frontline, Thorns or Earth are ideal, Thorns for more healing and a little bit of reflect, Earth to make him tankier, although you're never going to really activate this 6 rune effect until it's really late, the one where when you die you debuff the enemy, so that's something to keep in mind. In terms of Fightsouls, Unyielding works well on him, frontline or backline, Wolf works well on him to make him a lot tankier and do more damage. He can have some CC issues, so if you're having those, look into using Guardian or Unyielding on him. Backline, I'd probably run Unyielding on him if I had him backline. I don't think he needs Storm, because he's already going to be ulting 1 to 3, like up to 3 times per round. That's quite a bit. And in terms of chips, if you want him to be a little bit more all round, I'd probably run Scorpion on him, so he gets that HP drain to heal him up even more, and he's obviously going to have quite an easy time of triggering the marks, since he's going to be ulting everyone, because it keeps going to person by person. Python is obviously really simple. 30% stat gain is always going to be good on him, because he's both defensive and offensive, so that will work. Yeah, so this dude is top tier. He's probably the most important single character you can get if you want to be competitive. He's broken. Run him, get him, love him, and let's see if they actually try to counter him as well, as they did Demon Psyche with him when next anniversary arrives, eh? Hopefully this is helpful, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good one.